All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I have to give all the praises, honor, and glory unto the Heavenly Father and His only begotten Son, Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rukah. Double honors and respect to our apostles and elders, a great millstone, who rule well and taught us this truth. I would also like to say peace and salutations to the Lord's elect, the hopeful elect in the 1/3. This is your brother Salah. All right, in today's lesson, we're going to open up with 2nd Esdras, chapter 5, verse 8. There shall be confusion also in many places, and the fire shall be oft sent out again, and the wild beasts shall change their places, and menstruous women shall bring forth monsters. All right, and that last part is gonna be the main topic of this video, right? Because right here, I saw this video a while back, and I've been meaning to make a a lesson to the spirit, Lord willing, this will be edifying. But basically, right, you are, as we see in Babylon, right, with Esau and rulership, right, we've progressively been seeing, each generation of kids, getting worse and worse, right, we thought Gen Z was the worst, but no, no, Gen Alpha is pretty terrible, right? I'm just gonna say that. Um, this video right here, you see the title, and you see the channel. I think his name is I believe his name is Zach V2 or Zach version 2 or whatever. But he brings out a few good points, right? This video is, as you see from the title, right? A lot of teachers right now, they're quitting their jobs because these kids, man, they're just unruly, man. They're unruly, they're undisciplined, and and as the scripture says, man, they're just straight up monsters, man. They can't take instruction. They don't even know how to read. They're all in the folly, and the reason being, as you're gonna find out in this video, they're always on their phones. Their parents, they're not actually freaking teaching them anything, man. What parents are supposed to do, right? And it's by design, man. These wicked elites, right? They how they set up the society well back in the day, right? Even if you go back like a few years, like the early 2000s, like they had the 2000s and all the up I would say to like the first half of the 2010s, you know, like in my humble opinion, parents were actually there for the kids, but now because of the rise of smartphones, man, like, well, what are parents doing right now? Instead of actually disciplining their kids, teaching them how to read and write, they always when they cry or when they need something, what do the parents do? They give them a fucking iPhone, iPad, or whatever, man, smartphone device, to keep their minds distracted, right? And they're not actually teaching them anything, and that literally leaves these children, right, with their developing minds, literally to their own devices, right, and we're gonna see the end result of that which is what, man, kids with destroyed minds, it's just straight up monsters, right? So before I play parts of this video, I'm gonna get the copyright disclaimer. All right. So copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. So with that out of the way, we're gonna play this video.
And worse.
Hey, I just subbed a 5th grade class, and as someone with a lot of experience in the classroom and a lot of experience in reading, I just want you to know we should be really afraid about the future of our society. Do you know that every single kid thinks they're going to be a content creator, and when you ask them what their hobbies are, it's all video game and addictive things that they think are hobbies. Hobbies are not that. Hobbies are not addictive things. Hobbies are the things that brought you joy before you were 5 or 6 years old. So maybe it was soccer, maybe it was animals, maybe it was going outside, but these kids don't know those things about themselves. Quite frankly, I don't even think they know when they have to go to the bathroom. I don't even think they know when they're hungry. They just want to get back onto their devices ASAP. And I'm not blaming their parents. I mean, as a society, I think we should have had better parameters and better education about this 15 years ago, but we didn't, and here we are. So here's what you need to do. You need to set parameters with your child today. This is life or death. What job do you think they're going to get if they can't put their phone down for 5 minutes? What job do you think they're going to get if they can't even write their name legibly? What job do you think they're going to get if they can't spell the word caring and they're 11 years old?
Okay, so there's a couple things to talk about, but we go over to the comments real quick. I blame the adults, but no one wants to talk about that. I'm not blaming their parents. I am. I'm 37 and I know I have major issues with phone usage. Can't imagine this problem developing at 13 or 14. It's younger than that, to be honest. We're seeing it at 5, 6, 7 years old. But earlier in the clip, she talked about everybody believes they're going to be some sort of content creator in the future. Gone.
Through, man. All right, so we're gonna bring out the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 10, verse 6, and it says here, "Folly is set in great dignity, and the rich sit in the low place, man." And the rich, are the ones who, with this, with this true knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of the Holy Scriptures, right? The men of Great Millstone, GMS, start with the elder apostle Tahar on down, right? The elders, the apostles, and the bishops, man. That understand the true, the oracles and the true doctrine of Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, man. Prophecy of what's going to happen. The true wisdom of the scriptures. How the earth is supposed to be ran. And and again, man. And the reason why you're seeing, so an increase, or rather, a decrease, in overall intelligence, right, is because righteousness is not being pushed out. Proper instruction, man. What's being pushed out right now. Is all out. Freaking rebellion, right. And they disguise it. As jokes, or freaking internet memes or whatever, right. And kids will are going to go online. They're going to go on their phone. They're going to watch these dumbass YouTube videos. Right, and when I say that, like they're gonna watch. I don't know, man. And, they're gonna watch some some stupid video game streaming channel, or stupid cartoon or whatever, right? Right, or they're gonna watch one of those YouTube, those dumbass YouTube shorts. And and they're and just gonna pick up on on the internet culture, or like or the lingo, or what have you, and they're gonna learn that rather than their parents teaching them the basic things, right, such as what manners, their own freaking name, as you're gonna see later in the video, knowing how to read, write, spell, use the freaking bathroom, basic stuff that you're supposed to learn as a kid, right? But when you're going into these schools today, man, these kids, they're not freaking learning that. That's why Ecclesiastes 10 verse 6, man. That's what that's why it's highlighted. As of right now, because folly is in fact set in great dignity, man. And the consequence of that folly is what, utter rebellion, man. Mass confusion. And that's what you're seeing right now, man. A destroyed nation, and really what that is Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, bringing down Babylon the Great, man. Because we're at the end of the rulership. This is what happens. When the wicked are in charge, man. And proper instruction, is not being followed. You just get a bunch of wicked, rebellious, stupid people, man. Right. Right, and if we go to Matthew chapter 17, right? Well, let's read it in the blue, in the the KJV first, and then we'll read it in the BBE, which is the basic, the Bible basic English translation. So let's go to that. Right, and it says here, then Yahweh Shai answered and said, "O faithless and perverse generation." He was speaking to the to the disciples. Also, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yes, yeah. He was speaking to the disciples, when they tried, casting that demon off uh, f- from that one lunatic that that had the demon on him, right? Right, but you could also apply this today, man. And with a lot of people, right? So I'm gonna read again. Then Yahushua answered and said, "O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer bring him hither to me?" Right. So Yahushua, he was getting mad at the disciples, right? For not having faith, right? For not believing, and when he called them perverse, right? Let's go to the Strongs, and we're gonna go to the word perverse. I believe this is in the Greek. So
Strong's G 1294. Diastrepho. Diastrepho.
diastrepho, to distort, to turn aside, to oppose, to plot against, saving, propose, the plot against the saving purposes and plans of God, or Yahweh, to turn aside from the right path, to pervert, to corrupt. All right, so so Yahweh, he was rebuking his disciples. Why? Because they, because they went astray, right? And that's ultimately why Israel went into captivity, is because we we went off, against Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, man. That's why we're in the position that we're in. That's why we're seeing all this folly, being played out. Is to one, show what happens, when you don't follow the instructions of the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, and two is so we could see, how not to rule, man. We're seeing the world, under the authority of Esau, Edom, right? Who the Lord raised up at this time, right? You're seeing a world, ruled in complete folly and wickedness, right? Total, complete opposition and rebellion against, the Lord Yahweh Bashim Mashai. That's why you get the term secular, right? Like secular history or secular spirituality, or or whatever bullcrap. Basically taking away, the Lord Yahweh Bashim Mashai from, from reality, right? Or rather Esau's reality. Because Esau ultimately doesn't believe in the Lord, right? Yes, that's why you see, all this confusion and madness out, because the devil Esau, man, Diablos, or deceiver, right, as pervert, as you see, as perverted, turn aside, man, turn everything upside down. That's why you're seeing, that's why you're seeing all this madness, and rebellion happening everywhere. Women being put over men. Men being freaking effeminate. All this Moism bull crap. The food, air, water. Everything's fucking polluted, man, under the authority of this fucking devil. Man, that's why this place, it has to get judged, man. And that takes me to to this next scripture. Sure. All right, the book of Isaiah, chapter 29, verse 16. It says here, "Surely your turning of things upside down shall be esteemed as the potter's clay, for shall the work say of him that made it, he made me not, or shall the thing framed it of him that framed it, he had no understanding." And that's that's Esau, right? Esau thinks he can do better than Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. That's why you see the world in the state that it's in, right? Because again, man, it's not being followed under the under the ordinance of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. That's again, man. That's why your birth rates are at an all time low. Because they keep constantly indoctrinating these females, which really goes back to the garden. The serpent beguiling, lying, deceiving Eve, to take in those philosophies, which is what you see today, man. They're pushing out that what's it called? What they call it? That boss girl mentality. Chasing after the career rather than starting a family. And really, they set up a system, to punish women, for being traditional wives. Making it really expensive to have a baby. But they make it beneficial. And in fact, they incentivize divorce. They incentivize them, going to whatever career field they want. But as soon as as a woman, naturally, how the Lord created the woman to be, wants to be subservient to a man, have a family, then they get punished for that, or they're gonna be left high and dry, man. That just goes to show the wickedness of this devil, man. And which is really part of Esau's agenda to keep the population down. Because the devil, right? He plans, which real soon, right? The Lord's gonna put the spirit on this devil, to kill a lot of people, right? Because why? We're in that Revelation 12:12 where this devil is coming down with great wrath because he knoweth he has but a short time in rulership. Ultimately, this devil wants to rule out with that MOTB, that micro C hip, right? Which we are not to take. He wants to micro C hip everyone, so he can get that his pseudo blessing. And but the Lord's is going to allow it up to a certain point, and then once that's accomplished, that's when as you read on the book of Revelation, and all throughout the scriptures, that's when he's going to send out his ICBM nuclear missiles, and destroy Babylon the Great, as it rightfully should be destroyed. All right, so going back to Matthew 17 and Matthew chapter 17 verse 17. All right, so if we turn off the Strongs in red letter. All right, now if we switch to the basic Bible, English or interpretation. It says here, and Yahushua answering and said, "O false and foolish generation, how long will I be with you? How long will I put up with you? Let him come here, right? Because again, to be perverse, right? Is to what rebel, turn aside, man. From righteousness, the ordinances, right? And you turning aside from from ordinances, man. You're a damn fool, and that's what Esau and the rest of these people that that follow after Esau, man. They're all foolish, man. That's why folly is set in great dignity. Why? Because Esau is the one pushing out all this folly, right? He's pushing out utter rebellion against the Lord, which is why this damn devil has to be put down. All right, so if we continue on this in the video, let's jump to we're gonna jump to right here, and then we're gonna play the main point right here. So,
parents, I am a kindergarten teacher, okay? Please start saying your child's legal name that's on their birth certificate before they start school. Do you know how many children do not know their name when you're calling them on the roster because you've been calling them little man, princess, somebody? Call them by their legal name if they're going to start school.
I had a mother come say to me, "Call him Poppy, he listens better." Ma'am, he's in 3rd grade. Honestly, I never wanted to be a teacher in the first place when I was growing up, but I truly don't know how people deal with it in today's world. Another
and ultimately, man, I believe that Ezekiel chapter 9. Let's get that, man. Since I brought it out, I believe it was Ezekiel 9 verse 4, if I'm not mistaken. No, Salaki. It was 9 verse. It was Ezekiel 9 verse 6. Yeah, Ezekiel 9 verse 6. It has to take place, man. That's how we're gonna deal with this issue. Slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children, and women, but come not near any man upon whom is the mark, and that word mark goes into the Hebrew tawah, meaning the mark of exemption, right, and begin at my sanctuary. Then they began at the ancient men which were before the house, right? So that's gonna be the tabernacle of David, right, or the elect of Israel, man. Those are the one those are the only ones that could have that mark, right, which is the 144,000, and and the elect, man, the ones who were predestined, to receive our salvation, while everyone else is gonna get judgment and utter destruction, man. For all the wickedness that that you see happening, right? So we're just gonna jump all the way to here, and we're just gonna bring out a few more scriptures, and then we're gonna close off.
How are teachers doing it? I just want to know how they're doing it. Why are middle schoolers so bad? I work as a permanent sub at a middle school. So I'm permanent, therefore I work full time. I'm contracted. I work every single day, all school day at the same school. Today was the hardest day I've had. I almost walked out of the class. I was so overwhelmed and overstimulated. And the craziest part is the teacher was there. I was subbing for a teacher's assistant. So I was in the class assisting another teacher. And it was my first time in this teacher's class. And this person had absolutely no control over these sixth graders. Like, these students were throwing things, hitting each other, singing random songs out loud. They just wanted to hear themselves talk. They were walking across the room, over the desks, and on the chairs, and everybody was talking over each other. It was crazy. And the teacher told me that they had given up. They just given up. And even with the terrible behavior, this teacher still took the class outside, because that was like the incentive. Oh, if you're good today, I'll let you go outside, like all the other classes did. That class was horrible. The worst class that I've been in that entire school. And this teacher still let the class go outside.
So it really sounds like they will never learn. There's no consequences, no punishment. You'll just be able to get away with anything. And I know part of the reason why this happens is that if one of these kids go to their parents and say, my teacher today made us stay in school, or maybe I got detention during recess, something along the lines of that. No matter how bad the kid was and rightfully deserved the punishment, the parent will now go to the school, start yelling at the principal, and then everybody ends up getting in trouble. So you can't discipline these kids anymore, and they'll just run wild. And every time you start looking at the grade level under the kids that are a problem already, it just seems to get even worse.
iPad kids are out of control. Teachers all over the globe are reporting that Gen Alpha, which are the kids raised with this new age technology, are performing 2 times lower than their grade level.
I teach 7th grade, they are still performing on the 4th grade level.
They can't read or write properly. Not only that, but the rate of teachers quitting has never been higher due to Gen Alpha's terrifying behavior, which is aggressive and defiant.
Having to teach and work with you guys as children has been the most traumatic experience of my life.
This is a direct result from unlimited technology access, poor values, emotional neglect, and lazy parenting. Because shoving an iPad to a kid's face to distract them from their emotional needs was the worst thing you can do for a human's development. But now we're seeing this whole technology thing through. Now these kids have no creativity of their own, their attention spans have dropped to 1 second, and they have unrestricted internet access. Do you know what inappropriate content can do to a kid's brain? It can impair them for life.
And imagine seeing all of that while you're 7 years old. Oh man. Another comment from you guys.
And that's basically why Ezekiel 9 verse 6 has to happen, man. Man, these people just need straight judgment, man. Man, the whole earth is defiled and polluted, man. And let's get that. Isaiah chapter 24 verse 5. The earth also is defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinances, and broken the everlasting covenant. Right. Right. If you read on, therefore hath the curse devoured the earth, and they that dwell therein are desolate. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men left. That's eventually what's gonna happen, man. When the Lord sends out them ICBM nuclear missiles, man. For all this crap that you're seeing right now. And this is, and again, man, this is mainly due to Esau, Edom, man. The so-called, white man. Again, obviously he's not all white people, but but it's that evil lineage of Esau, Edom, man. And the ones in power, like the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, Oppenheimers, DuPonts, Gettys, man. And those those wicked elites, man, those wicked elite bankers, the ones who control the banks, the media, the music, the food, the air, the water, man. Or what they put in it. These people, man. These people need to be destroyed, man. They need to go into captivity, man. Serve out, their punishment. And after that 1,000 years, pertaining to the book of Obadiah, chapter 1, verse 18. The Lord's gonna utterly do away with them, man. Just like what they've been trying to do to the Israelites, and what they've been doing, to countless people across the earth, man. Man, just genociding and killing a bunch of people, including their own people, man. And as the scripture says, he that is not good to himself, for who shall he be good unto, man. And you even see that, yeah, him doing that to his own people, man, his own children, man. Just them being, violent brute beasts, man. Monsters. And that's why this place, it has to get judged, man. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 22. How long ye simple ones will love simplicity, and scorners delight in scorning, and fools hate knowledge, right? Right, and this is mainly speaking of you Israelites, right? That mock and scoff the truth, right? Because we go out on the highways and hedges, man, and we go on the internet, telling you to repent, turn from your wicked ways. The Lord Yahweh Shem Yahushua is going to destroy you, but we know a lot of you are not going to hear this, right. Only the elect, only the ones who the Lord Yahweh Shem Yahushua wants. They're going to hear this word and understand it, while everyone else is going to be destroyed, right? And you could also apply fools hating knowledge to everyone else, because ultimately, man, Esau, Edom, again, he's the ultimate fool, man, the ultimate rebellious child, because he's not taking heed or to the ordinance of Yahweh Bashem Yahushua. Like, yeah, he might know them, but he's not not going to incorporate them, or at least not incorporate them fully. And he's gonna do do whatever he wants, man. And that's or what the Lord set him out to do, which is what, kill, destroy, take peace away from the earth, as it says in the book of Revelation. Right, and let's get that. Revelation chapter 6, verse 3, and when he had opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, "Come and see." And there went out another horse, and that was red, right? And that's referring to Esau, Edom, because name Edom, Edom, in the Hebrew, it means red, right? Right, and that's how we know it represents Esau, because their blood shows forth through their skin, right? Again, it's not, again, today, we obviously know today it's not everyone that's white, but yeah, but for the most part, that represents Esau, man. And power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that should kill one another, and there was given unto him a great sword. That goes back, into the book of Genesis, where Isaac blessed Esau, with the power of the sword. Right, and that's how Esau got that dominion, was through his blessing, right? Basically the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, gave Esau the dominion to rule, right? And we see the effect of that rulership, and now the Lord's getting ready to take Esau down, right? Because we're at the end of his rulership, and the Lord's getting ready to return, to redeem his elect, right? Those that are covered under the blood of Yahushua, through his sacrifice. while everyone else, man, they're gonna feel that fire. Right, that's why it's very important, right? I'm speaking for myself, right? Right, to take instruction now, man, because Proverbs chapter 13, verse 16, it says here, every prudent man delighteth in knowledge, but a fool layeth open his folly, right? And that's exactly what you're seeing, with these kids, man. These 2/3, these devils, these heathens, man. Especially their kids, man. What are they doing? These teachers are saying, they're making a bunch of noise. They're unruly. They can't control themselves, man. That's basically Esau, man. You'll higher up the chain, man. What are these, these wicked elites? A lot of these wicked elites are getting in trouble for what they're getting exposed for, man. Being PDF, PDF files, man. Their names showing up on that Epstein list. And of course, it goes deeper than that, man. It goes into that, their left-handed rituals, man. You're going back to their child sacrifices. Which basically goes to show you, man. And what. Why it basically shows you why these people are the wicked, right? The Lord Yahweh, right? He commanded us not to follow, not to follow any of their ways, right? That's basically what they're pushing forth, man. And through the media, right? With all this Planned Parenthood, telling the woman to be independent and all that, and that's and that eventually it's got to trickle down to these kids, right? That's why these kids, they don't know how to act or discipline themselves is because their parents are absent. They're too busy working, or they just don't care. Everyone's on their phones. The parents are on their phones. The kids are also on these devices, and and it's fucking, and again, man, it's fucking up these kids' heads because their minds are still developing, right? They don't have that understanding or that reproof, man, that knowledge of that basic knowledge of how to operate, right? So what's gonna happen to these kids, right? Right there, these kids are just gonna end up growing up to be monsters, man. So in Proverbs chapter 10, verse 8, the wise in heart will receive commandments, but a prating fool shall fall. And that's what's gonna happen to these people, man. Especially these kids. That they're all gonna fall. A fool despises his father's instruction, but he that regardeth reproof is prudent, right? And again, speaking for myself, that's why it's important, to take that rebuke or that reproof, man. So we can become more disciplined, in the body of Yahweh Shem Shai. All right, Proverbs chapter 17, verse 21. He that begot a fool do it to his sorrow, and the father of a fool have no joy, man. That's why a lot of these parents, right? They don't have any joy in their kids. Is because they themselves, they didn't receive proper instruction, or both, right? Again, man, they too busy on their phones, looking at folly, and then their kids see that, and they look at these same videos, and then they act the same way, man. It's just utter madness and confusion, right? And the Lord Yahweh Shem Shai is about to put an end to all this, right? So, yeah, so I'm just gonna end off the lesson right there. There, right, 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 you basically see why the Lord Yahweh Shem Shai, he needs to come back, right? Because if this continues on, man, you ain't gonna have none but with a bunch of degenerates, just dumbass people running around, man. Just like the movie Idiocracy, like in those wicked those wicked elites, man. They basically knew that this was gonna come, right down the years, through their media and their technology, right? which which in the kingdom, right? Right, they're not going to be using technology like that, it'll still exist, but just not, they're just not going to use it in that way, right? Everything, everything's gonna, is gonna have order and righteousness, man. And as the scripture says, man, and going to the Lord's prayer, doing His Father's will on earth as it is in heaven, right? 11:44, called law Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, right? That's ultimately what's gonna happen. So with that, we're gonna enough listen right there. Hope this lesson has been edifying to you, Akim, and you feel Akwath. And with that, we to say, call Halayim La, Abanawa, Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim Rakakadash. Double honors and respect to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well and taught us this truth. I would also like to say peace and salutations to the Lord's elect, the hopeful elect in the 1/3, each brother Salah. And with that, I'd like to say Shalom.